One of the biggest combat updates we've ever seen, the Nether update, is just around the corner. Because of this, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to actually do more damage in Hypixel Skyblock. And whether you're an endgame player or a beginner, respectively, every single person will have something to gain from this video, as damage in this game is super convoluted. You would not believe how many players are actually not doing nearly as much damage as they could be doing. But before we do get started with today's video, like always, if you have seen more videos like this, or this video does end up helping you out, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps out the channel so much more than you think. Plus, look, subscribing is always free, and you can always unsubscribe later if I start making trash videos. With that out of the way, if you have any questions for me, you want to know what my mod pack is, or you want to know what my resource pack is, you can download both in the channel's official Discord server. The link will be in the description. And keep in mind, this video may be quite long, so there's going to be timestamps in the time bar down below if you'd like to skip to any other part of this video that's more prevalent to you. But before we do get into today's video, please let me introduce the first sponsor we have ever had on this YouTube channel. You wouldn't believe it if I told you, but this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. I'm sure most of you have already heard of Raid Shadow Legends before, as it's one of the most popular mobile games to ever exist. Raid is a completely free mobile game that boasts over 600 playable champions, with even more to come. All of these champions belong to unique factions and have their own rich history in the world of Teleria. With all of these amazing champions, you can enjoy some of Raid's story-rich campaign, dungeon runs, boss fights, and PvP battles. Like I said before, Raid is free on iOS, Android, and PC, and if you'd like to join, you can click my link in the description down below to join Raid today. Recently though, Raid added in one of the biggest and craziest bosses yet. This thing is a Hydra with 6 different heads, and each one of it being a completely different boss on its own. This boss is really cool and takes complete strategy to be able to beat perfectly. For example, the head of Blight is a nasty one. This one creates a massive poison cloud which not only damages your team, but also makes it extremely hard to land hits against the Hydra. Luckily though, this boss is extremely weak against fire. Make sure to bring a good champion with a fire ability to take out this guy quickly. The next one is the Head of Torment. The Head of Torment is the scariest head on the team and uses its special ability, True Fear, to drag down your team. Genuinely, the only way to stop this guy is to hide. You're going to need to bring champions that have Veil or Perfect Veil skills in order to even have a chance against this guy. Even though we just got done talking about the super cool new Hydra boss in Raid, I want to tell you guys 3 things that I really like about the game. The first thing is going to be the PC accommodation. I personally like playing all my games on PC, so it's really great to know that there's actually a port of Raid on your PC, and this really helped me get into the game personally. The next thing is that Raid Shadow Legends has a fully fledged story and campaign. This is genuinely really cool to see from a mobile game and can be one of the most addicting elements of the game. And the last thing I really like about the game is the awesome PvP elements that Raid has added. Not only is there some awesome strategical 1v1 PvP elements to the game, but there's also clan battles as well, which makes it really fun to play by yourself and with friends as well. So what's new in Raid? Raid is giving away a super limited edition champion to every player in the game. Some of you may recognize him already as esports legend and Navi superstar Simple. Between now and January 28th, 2022, Simple's limited edition champion is available for free to both new and old players of Raid. All you have to do is log in for 7 days between now and January 28th, and he's yours. If you miss that date, you miss out forever. I've genuinely done some PvP against Simple and gotten completely steamrolled by him, so I definitely recommend picking him up. There seriously has never been a better time to get started. Hit the link in the description or scan my QR code and you'll get the epic champion Ina, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in game. All this treasure will be waiting for you here, and the rewards will be only available for 30 days and for new players only. Once you're in, you can find me in game under the name Row137YT. It's that easy. Just click the link in the description and I'll see you in game. Thank you Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Aside from armor and weapons, one of the most important items in this game for doing damage is going to be talismans. I know a lot of you already know this, but this is really important as there's a lot of people in this game that really don't have that many talismans. The primary use of talismans is actually the reforge you put on it. You'll notice that this soulflow pile I have on here has the forceful reforge on it. This literally means that if I have this talisman in my inventory, or rather inside my accessory bag, I will be getting directly 5 strength. Now, there are dozens and dozens of talismans in this game, and you have to keep in mind that even though 5 strength seems insignificant, when you have 50 talismans or more, that stat really adds up. And oftentimes these little insignificant talismans can result in you doing more than double your damage. Please keep that in mind. One of the biggest PSAs of this video is just get more talismans. Now, as talismans take the direct stat of your Reforge, the Reforge you put on it is the next really important part. And again, is simply free damage. If you really would like to learn more about properly reforging talismans, I've made a video and I'll throw it up on the cards right now because this concept warrants an entire video all on its own. Generally though, if you want to play it safe, one of the best reforges in the game for talismans is shaded, as it gives you a decently even split of strength and crit damage. It's very important when reforging your talismans that you opt to get your strength and your crit damage as close together as possible. As you can see, mine are only about 10 apart. If you want to learn more about that concept, please check out the reforging video. This is one of the easiest ways to get free damage. One of the next super important things are not only the reforges you put on talismans, but the reforges you put on armor and weapons as well. Luckily, this is extremely simple. The best reforge in the game for armor by far is the Ancient Reforge. There's almost no question about this. At the moment, it's the best. The only issue is this reforge costs a reforge stone, which can cost hundreds of thousands of coins, and it's not always a good idea to put that on every piece of armor. If you've got the money to buy Ancient, I highly recommend it, but if you don't have the money to put Ancient on, one of the best reforges you can get for free is going to be the Fierce Reforge. The Fierce Reforge is a random luck reroll given out by the blacksmith. It has good crit chance, good crit damage, and good strength, so if you can't afford Ancient, I recommend it. As for armor, that's as simple as reforges get. When you get to swords, it gets ever so slightly more complicated. The two best reforges in the game for swords by far is the Fabled Reforge and the Withered Reforge. The damage of both of these reforges is almost negligible, so it doesn't really matter which one you get. Oftentimes, I tend to opt for Withered, as most of the time I prefer doing more consistent damage. These reforges also require reforge stones, which can be purchased on the AH, and these reforges can cost a lot of money. It may not be worth to put it on every weapon. As for the best free reforge from the blacksmith, the best free reforge for swords is going to be Spicy. This is if you have 100% crit chance. If you don't have 100% crit chance, I highly recommend using instead the Reforge Sharp, which will give you a lot of crit chance. So pretty simply, if you have the money, get Fabled. If you don't have the money, get Sharp. Another little interesting tidbit is on the Flower of Truth and the Soul Whip in specific, Suspicious is actually the best reforge, as it has the ability to give more base damage, and since those weapons have such low base damage, you will be doing more with Suspicious. Now that you've got all your reforging done with, it's now time to look at enchants. Enchants can actually be one of the most important parts on a sword and can actually result in doing significantly more damage. This part of the weapon can often be overlooked by endgame players, as they won't even think about some of the enchants that go on their weapon. You wouldn't believe how much of an impact this actually has on the weapon's damage though. As a general rule, you're going to want to have every single one of the good enchants on your sword. All the enchants I have on the screen here, except for Ultimate Wise, are basically all of the good sword enchants. But there's a couple of these you may want to change depending on your needs. For example, First Strike is one of the most important ones. First Strike has the counterpart Triple Strike. You can only have one of these enchants on your sword at a time and not both. Now, First Strike, for example, makes it so every single hit you do is double off the first hit. This is extremely good for mobs like Zealots, where it is most important to one-tap those mobs. If you're trying to one-tap any mob in the game, First Strike is by far the best enchant on your sword. But if you're doing something like dungeons or fighting bosses, the best enchant is going to be Triple Strike. Triple Strike makes it so the first 3 attacks you do 40% more damage, equating to a total of 120% more damage in total. The caveat is you get the most value out of Triple Strike only if it's a mob you can hit 3 times. As you can see, if I kill this zombie here, it would be significantly better to have First Strike, as I can kill it in 1 hit already. If you're in dungeons fighting mini bosses or bosses and you can't one-tap them, or you can't one-tap Slayer bosses, it's always best to use the enchants Triple Strike over First Strike. And the next important enchant we're going to talk about is then Execute. The other side of Execute is Prosecute. Prosecute is another enchant similar to First Strike. What this enchantment does is essentially makes it so you do significantly more damage on your first couple of hits. Again, this enchantment is really important if you're trying to one-tap Zealots or mini bosses. You're going to want to have the enchant Prosecute. Execute, on the other hand, does significantly more damage when an enemy takes multiple hits and is low. And Execute can do a lot more damage, especially if the mob takes a lot of hits. Again, this is another really important one in dungeons. These are definitely the most important enchants on a sword. If you're going for first hit damage, you're going to want to have the combo First Strike and Prosecute. But if you're generally fighting mobs that are going to take more than 3 hits, you're going to definitely want Triple Strike and then Execute. As you can see here, my Aspect of the Void is completely messed up and has First Strike and Execute, which generally aren't a great combo. There's a couple other enchants in the game that you can interchange like this. The only other really important one for damage is going to be Sharpness and then Smite. Sharpness does extra damage to every single mob, which makes it great. Smite does extra damage to undead mobs. Now, a lot of mobs in this game tend to be undead, but as a general rule, if you're playing dungeons or you're doing zombie slayers, I highly recommend putting Smite on your sword rather than Sharpness, as it'll do more damage than Sharpness would. But if you're doing things like Svens or spiders, for example, idea to have Sharpness. Now, normal enchants are really important, but what's also really important is also the ultimate enchants. Luckily, ultimate enchantments are also extremely simple. And basically how it is right now is the best ultimate enchant you can put on your sword is usually going to be Soul Eater 5. This enchant takes the strength of a mob you killed, multiplies it, and then adds it to the damage of your next hit, making your hits do way more damage than they did before. This is super good, and for swords, except for Chimera, this is by far the best ultimate enchant in the game. Now, if you're using a bow, like a Juju bow or a Terminator bow, again, the best enchant you can put on this weapon is going to be Soul Eater 5 as well. One of the better enchants used to be Rend, but Rend got nerfed into the ground, so don't use that one. When it comes to armor, there's also one simple answer, and the best ultimate enchant for armor is going to be Legion. If you got mage armor, you can put Wisdom on it instead, but essentially putting Legion 5 on all of your armor makes it so when you've got more people around you, your stats are higher. This obviously helps you do significantly more damage, but Legion is very, very expensive. Now, after talking about all the meta ultimate enchants, you'll notice that we actually missed one really important one, and that's One For All. Now, One For All is very special in the fact that if you put One For All on a sword, it gets rid of every single other enchant for One For All, which at first seems really bad, but the base ability for One For All is to make your weapon do significantly more base damage. And on really high damage weapons, this can be extraordinarily good. At the moment, One For All is actually kind of the meta for doing a lot of damage in this game. If you're using a giant sword or an emerald blade, you're definitely going to want to have One For All on these weapons, as they will do way, way more damage with it. And by way more, I mean that some of these weapons can do even close to double their damage. The Livid Dagger, for example, is a weapon that oftentimes people put One For All on as well. One For All makes it so the Livid Dagger literally does almost double the damage as it does before with One For All instead of not having it. This may seem all well and good, but you got to keep in mind that you're losing out on a lot of really good perks when you run One For All. For example, you're not going to be getting any lifesteal, and this is one of the most important ones. As soon as you put One For All on a weapon, your survivability drops a lot. It's up to you whether you want to put One For All on a weapon or not. Keep in mind, it actually costs a lot of money at the moment, and it's also pretty much been teased that this enchant is going to get a nerf in the near future, as it really does antiquate all of the other enchants in the game at the moment. If you're running a really high damage weapon, I'm talking like giant swords, Livid Daggers, Soul Whips even, Emerald Blades, weapons like that, One For All is definitely the best enchant. Just understand there's a lot of cons that come with it as well. Now, with all that done, you've got yourself some pretty good gear. But there's another factor that's really important with damage and can quite literally make it so you can do a third of your damage without it. And that's the combat skill. With every level of combat you get the ability to do more damage to mobs. To my knowledge, this applies to every single mob in the game. What's ridiculous about this skill is all it takes is to get to combat 25 and you will literally be doing double the damage you did before, which is absolutely ridiculous. After you get to combat 25, if you continue to level up and get yourself all the way to combat 50, you'll be doing 200% more damage to mobs, effectively literally doing triple the damage that you are doing at combat 0. And this can also mean a lot of the times, even if you have good gear, your combat skill can completely nerf how much damage you're doing. Combat is definitely the most important skill, but the next most important one is going to be forging. Now, you're literally a sociopath if you actually like doing this skill, but there are benefits when it comes to damage. Keep in mind, they are very, very little. As you can see from forging level 1 to 2, you quite literally only get 1 strength. I don't really recommend doing this unless you literally have nothing else better to do. The next important part we're going to talk about is pets. This is where I'm going to actually recommend specific gear rather than just enchants or reforges to add on to them. Now, by far the best pets in the game are the Ender Dragon pet and the Golden Dragon pet. By a long shot, these are the best pets. If you can afford these, they're sold up on the AH for about 500 mil, with a G-Drag being significantly more than that. If you're trying to get one that's like level 200, it's probably going to cost bit intisher. But if you can't afford G-Drag, the general rule of thumb is that for damage, the overall best damage pet is probably going to be the legendary Wither Skeleton pet. If you're trying to do the most one-hit damage, a legendary Lion can be good. And as a final option, the legendary Tiger is also really good. Probably better than the Lion, but the Lion's just good for one-hit damage. Generally, I recommend a Wither Skeleton pet though. If you're early onto the game, pick yourself up like a Griffin pet or a Tiger pet. These are generally a pretty good choice for early game players. If you're doing Diana event, legendary Griffin is also really good, though this pet is significantly more expensive, and these actually have a huge impact on the amount of damage you do. The one item that's affordable and the best for damage is the Crochet Tiger plushie. If you do not have one of these on your weapon right now, I highly recommend doing it. It costs only about 400,000 coins and increases your attack speed by 35%. This means just with this pet item, you can be doing 1/3 more damage. So for pet items, this is the best. A lot of people instead opt to go for the Dwarf Turtle Shellmet. This item you can throw on your pet and it makes it so that you are completely immune to knockback. This doesn't apply for every mob. Some mobs do true knockback, which will still push you away. Now the Shellmet doesn't give you inherently more damage, but the benefit to it is if you're not taking knockback, it's actually significantly easier to land more hits, meaning your DPS could go up significantly. Especially if you have high attack speed, you have to make sure you hit every single hit to get the most damage. Therefore, having a Shellmet is also really good. Most endgame players opt into having a Shellmet, but if you're really trying to get the most damage and efficiency, the Crochet Tiger plushie is the way to go. Now, those are all the primary contributing factors to your damage, but there's a couple more things that are very important. The first one is Fairy Souls. At the beginning of the game, you're going to want to go find all these Fairy Souls around the map. You can watch some time DO videos or get some waypoint mods going, but you're going to really want to make sure that you have every single one of these. You can check your quest book to see how many you have. Every 5 Fairy Souls, you get an upgrade. These will give you a lot of strength and a lot of health per every set of 5 that you get. These are monumental for getting early game damage, but if you're a late game player as well, you're going to want to pick these up as they give about the stats of a Talisman's worth. And the next item we're going to talk about here is Hot Potato Books. These can be bought on the bazaar. You're going to want to buy 10 of these. After that, you can get Fuming Potato Books, which cost about 1 mil each, but you only need 5 of them. That will give you another 10 damage and another 10 strength on a weapon and is significantly more expensive than Hot Potato Books. The next item you can get is Art of War. This costs about 5 mil on the AH and gives you a bonus 5 damage. It's good if you're really trying to max out a weapon. And lastly, for some weapons, gemstones can also be really important. As for this giant sword, you can see that I have 2 Jasper gemstones. Jasper gemstones contribute to a little bit of extra strength. If you have Jasper gemstone slots, I highly recommend putting in fines at the very least, but if you can afford to put in flawless or perfect, definitely consider doing that as it is just extra damage. And you made it to the end. I'm sorry if this video was quite long. I definitely expect it to be. I tried to make this guide cover as much ground as possible, but also try to be pretty quick and speedy. If there's a couple points you didn't understand, please let me know in the comments, and I'm sorry about that. But if this guide did help you out, again, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps out the channel so much more than you think. With that all out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.